Okay, so I was looking through Gradebook, and it appears that some of you have not done your assignments and have not, completed everything. I cannot possibly emphasize to you how important it is to stay on top of your assignments and get your stuff turned in, because you will never ever be able to make all this up. It's just too much information. So go in and make sure in your grade center that you have turned in all the assignments that are due. And if not, if you need to talk to me, you can call me, you can email me, whatever we need to do. We're early. I don't want anybody to get off track. This week's chapter is on the inner workings of a law office, but I was going to talk about next week. Next week, you have to be here. If for some reason you cannot be here, talk to me ASAP, because we have something that we're doing in class, and part of that is you guys for next week on chapter 4. It's on ethics and professional responsibility. You heard Ms. Osborne talk about that a lot today. It is a vital part, and it's crucial to what you guys do. You guys don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to get your attorney in trouble. So this really lays out for you what your responsibilities are. It has some different assignments and different key terms and things to look at. So for next week, what's going to be a little bit different is you guys are going to essentially lead the class. All of you, I want you to review chapter 4. I need you to come to class prepared with at least 3 questions on either things you were confused about, things that you felt were important. All of you will be working together to determine what it is that you took away from the chapter. And you will each receive chips, essentially. So how you get credit for participating is you have to answer, you have to ask questions, and you have to get rid of your chips. After class, all of you will be required to submit 3 test questions. It can be multiple choice, it can be essay, it can be short answer, it can be whatever you want. But each of you will be required to submit 3. And from those, then I will pick the test questions for you guys to have a specific test just on chapter 4. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Yes.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure I just wanted to be 100%.
Okay.
Like, I know the grading system, as far as it's at a certain number of points, it's not put on a curve at any point, is it?
It depends. It depends.
Alright, so I should make my questions as difficult as possible.
Well, I mean, you can, but I mean, it's still, yeah. But the questions are going to come from everybody.
Okay.
You know.
We're saying be advantageous to me. They're incredibly difficult as I can make them. So at least I get that one. I don't know about anybody else, but I get it.
So you mean on okay, I see what you're saying.
You want the questions to come from the class, though, right? From
the questions
the class
and
time.
the material. Yes, and the material that you've covered. So, yeah, but it's up to me as to what I pick to put on the exam.
I don't know.
So, yeah. Yeah. So, you guys submit your questions, and then I will give you an exam based on what you guys submit. So, definitely take the class time to throw out any, material you didn't understand, questions, what you felt was important, all that. But it will require that you will have to have reviewed the chapter in advance, or you're never going to be able to participate, and you're definitely not going to be able to submit your questions. So, anyway, that is for next week. But for this week on Blackboard, in the information that I put out there for Blackboard, It had the inner workings of a law office. You know, a law office, depending on where you work, it's going to be different. A small office and the inner workings of that office is going to be very different than a very large office if you're working, you know, in a specialized area. As it says in here, most people are employed by private law firms. You know, the size and structure is going to affect your work environment. Each one's going to have different policies and procedures, different conditions, filing systems, billing, timekeeping, and financial procedures. As far as working with policies and procedures, you know, I find the smaller the firm, the more lax all that is. The bigger the firm, it's going to be a lot more structured and laid out. Sole proprietors is going to be the simplest business form. You got one person that's going to own the practice, and it's going to go directly, you know, any profits whatsoever are going to go to the attorney. Usually when you have an office like that, you're going to have a wide variety, and you're going to get a lot of experience because they'll probably do a lot of different type of legal work. It's not going to be so specialized. Partnerships can be set up differently. You can have 2 or more people working together. Liability of partners can be different depending on how it's set up. You can also have limited liability partnerships. And why that is an advantage is because it helps people avoid, you know, personal liability for malpractice for themselves and their partners. So that makes sense. You also have professional corporations as well, but it's run very similar to partnerships. So depending on, excuse me, where you work, they can all be set up differently depending on what you know, what you have. It's important, regardless of where you work, to understand the hierarchy of things. You know, who do you need to report to for different assignments, or if you're having trouble with things, who do you need to go ask? Who do you need to talk to? This chapter echoes a lot of what you've just been hearing this morning about being courteous and professional. Lines of authority and accountability vary from firm to firm. And also, you know, depending on how big the office is, you may have a manager, an office manager that deals with a lot of personnel or HR issues. So it just depends on how the place you work is set up. Employment policies, a lot of places you may work, especially in larger ones, are going to have performance evaluations. It's always important to know what is expected of you. You know, what are your duties? What is it they want you to do? Be prepared, obviously, for your evaluation, and be your own advocate. Most paralegals and employers, they all benefit from evaluations. You know, be sure to come prepared, know what's expected. You know, hopefully you work in an environment where feedback is appreciated and welcomed, and it reciprocates both ways. There's sections in here about employment discrimination and termination. Another important section within your chapter is filing procedures. Confidentiality and client information. It is one of the most professional and important obligations that you have. There can be criminal sanctions as well as other sanctions for violation of it. Never share information about your clients with anybody except for within your office and things that you're working on. It says in here, don't share war stories. Never leave any client information where others might see it. You're going to be privy to a lot of personal information, whether it be through medical records, financial information, or otherwise. So, you know, if you're at your desk and you have somebody walk in, be sure to, you know, if you need to, cover up valuable, you know, papers and that type of thing. Yes.
As far as the war stories are concerned, like if you take out all the identifying information, is that all right?
To a certain extent, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can
that's
do-
essentially what you're doing when you network with another paralegal, right?
Yes.
You're just not giving detailed information that could link them to any specific person or case, you're
Yes.
just information seeking.
Yes. I've got this client that came in with blah, blah, blah. You're not identifying the client. You're not, here's what I've got. How do you file a,
Or here's what happened, as long as you take out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, 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 yes. You can certainly do that. So you can get help from, where you might need it on different things. Another important aspect is filing procedures. More firms are going from paper files to online files, and they are using cloud-based storage such as Dropbox. And when you do that, there's certain information, typically they're going to be in files depending on what kind of file it is, whether it be, you've got all your pleadings together, motions, which are requests that you're asking from the court or from another attorney, and orders that come in, if you've got subpoenas, if you're gathering all this client information, how your attorney wants it organized and done, it's going to be specific for each one. Typically, the older stuff goes on the bottom, and then the newer stuff is put on top. So when they grab the file, they can see what's most recent and can go down and do that. So when you put stuff on a cloud-based storage, obviously you want the name, but you also want it by date so that you can run a search and figure out when certain things were done. Ms. Osborne talked this morning about Alicourt, Alifile. That's another great way. You can go back. It's sort of like a snapshot of your case and what's been filed and what's been put in there. So that's good as well. You have to keep files for, depending on, what state and what each bar requires, for a certain number of years. So once you're done with the file, don't go run into the shredder, because you have to keep it for up to 5 years, but have an organized way to know how long it's been there so that you'll know when you can purge it as well. You may have clients from time to time that want original documentation back. If you're getting ready to purge a file, you may want to touch base with that client. It just depends on what the information is. Like if you're handling divorce cases, maybe you need photographs or what have you during the case. They may want that back. They may have forgotten about it. So I think as a courtesy, it's always nice, Plus, you don't need it anyway. You don't have enough room for all that. So that's fine to give them back. Also, some people download things, put it on DVDs, hard drives. Those are different and more cost-effective ways of storing instead of having to rent space to keep files over a period of time. Form files, depending on what kind of practice you're in, it's great to have a folder, just criminal forms, Social Security forms, family forms, property forms, whatever area, that you are able to work in. Keep those forms, and then you've got those specific ones that you can always go back to, and it makes life a lot easier instead of trying to reinvent the wheel every time. Fee arrangements is another important aspect that you guys are going to be exposed to. Depending on the kind of case is how the fee is going to be set up. Your attorneys are the ones who can designate what fees are going to be charged for different services. Sometimes it depends on the complexity of it. Some of them bill by the hour, depending on the type of case. Some of them, I know in criminal cases, it's a flat fee and you want it all up front. So, whereas you have a car wreck and you represent some injured individual, you may do it on a contingency fee basis. In other words, they don't pay anything up front, but at the end you're going to get, up to a third, maybe even 50% of any of the recovery. So essentially, the attorney's taking the risk of going through with the case, and at the end, they will get some of the recovery. Do y'all have any questions about that? So contingency fee, billable fees, and then you have some flat rate fees. And it all depends on the case, it depends on the attorney. If you are in a situation where you have to keep up with billable hours, it's really important to have accuracy in billing. Some firms bill, every 15 minutes, some bill every 6 minutes, half hour, you have to keep up with all that information, and you need to know how each person or your attorney wants it done. Okay, so what's a contingency fee?
When you have a portion of, winning, would it be winnings?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, see, y'all are awake, okay. Yes, that's a contingency fee. And typically, what kind of cases are gonna do those?
Would disability cases do that?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
Because there are some lawyers though that will say that you don't have to pay them unless you win your case.
Well, it is, but that is not, it's a contingency fee, but it's not based on a percentage. In other words,
Okay.
you may get 25% of the back pay, but there's caps on it. And you can also petition to do it you can petition to do it billable as well. It depends. It depends on what kind of case it is, and how they have it set up. And it all depends on how that contract reads. So,
It's basically just which attorneys do, like how they do it.
yes, yes, yes. So yes, it may say, you don't win unless we win, but it could be a contingency fee, or it could be at the end of the day, you may win and they may get paid, but you still have to bill all the hours for it to get paid.
Or flat rate.
Yes,
Like you
yes,
say, you have to pay us $5,000 if you win.
yes. It can be, and it has to be approved by a Social Security judge in that case. So if you have them set up on let's say you had to appeal the case, you lost, you had to appeal it, and then you submit a bill, the judge has to approve it. It's not like a lawyer gets to just do it whatever they want. The judge could say this is not reasonable, or it is, and the judge essentially has to sign off on it before it'll be approved. So Social Security is a little bit different than some other cases most of the time, especially in car wrecks and that kind of thing. As long as you're abiding by the rules that are set forth by the bar, whatever you and your client agree to, that's what it's going to be. It could be a third, it can be 50, up to 50%. So, it just depends. And a lot of that depends on the complexity of the case. So, it just depends. Any other questions about that? Yes.
Sorry.
No,
What
you're
other-
fine.
What other types of cases are like that other than car accident? Or is that basically?
Personal
That's,
injury.
yeah, slip and fall.
Okay.
If you go in somewhere and you fall down, on the grape at the grocery store, that may be,
No wet floor or something.
yeah, no wet floors. You can get a contingency fee for that. Let me think. I guess car wrecks was the first one that popped in my mind. But yeah, personal injury cases are primarily where you're going to find those for the most part. Yeah.
Where the winnings fluctuate is, that's how it was explained to me, where the winnings can fluctuate based on what you're winning. Like in divorce, you're looking at a certain amount of dollars that everybody needs to split up. So that would not normal, or in Social Security,
Mhm.
you're looking at a certain dollar amount and that doesn't change or vary, so it's hard to make a percentage out of that
Mhm. Right.
versus a flat fee or a billable hour.
Yes, yes. And another thing, a major conflict in divorce cases as far as contingency fees, you can't have it like, I get 30% if you get divorced, because then that puts you in a total conflict, Yeah, that can get you into all kinds of trouble. So, yeah, you just need a flat rate. Another term you guys are going to hear are retainer, which means initial advance payment to the firm, like It depends on what kind of case it is, but I think in divorce cases, it could be like $1,500, whatever. And that's just an upfront payment to get the case started, especially if you're having to order records and do that type of thing. And the attorneys will bill against that amount until the retainer is exhausted, and then the billable hours kick in on top of that. But it's just money essentially to get you started. Yes.
My mom is a human resource supervisor at Newport Steel in Decatur,
Okay.
so she comes across, just random things.
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah. But, so if somebody walked in the office building and it's raining outside,
Mhm.
but the rug had been there for a few years, it was full of water, so it doesn't absorb, when people walk in or anything, and somebody trips and falls,
Mhm.
and, breaks a hip or, there's anything like that. I mean, could they file a lawsuit because of that, because the building wasn't taken care of properly?
Well, first of all, I mean, you kind of get into a complicated area because if it happened on the job, then is it workers' comp? That is a aspect you have to look at. Slip and fall cases, I'll go ahead and tell you, are one of the hardest cases to recover because you're stuck with a dual. Yeah, we're kind of getting off topic here, but you're stuck with a dual. In other words, the grocery store and the grape. The question is, did the grocery store know that the grape was there and they just did not clean it up and do anything about it? And then you have somebody that comes in and injures themselves. The flip side of that is, well, didn't you see the grape? And so a lot of times when you have something like that, if you have where someone had come in the office and the water was standing and it was slippery and they came and said, you guys got to do something about that, then it triggers the prior knowledge. If somebody comes in after that and then, breaks a hip, then, all right, now they knew about it, did not do anything to fix it, and so they could be looking, at something, but whether it fall under, depending on the status of the person injured, it would vary. So did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So, it would all depend. Another thing, I don't know if any of you guys will be in charge of handling money where you're going to come to work, but when you take retainer fees, all that goes into a trust account, and as you bill against it, then it can go into the attorney's operating account. But essentially, you got to think of it in terms, the retainer hasn't been earned yet. You've received money, but then once you start working on the case, it's sitting there as if you're billing against it. And once you bill against it, then you can move it on to the other account so that you can use it for other means.
When you were talking about flat rate fees, that can turn into billable hours, right? I mean,
Give me an
like an
example.
attorney doesn't work on a murder case just forever and ever, amen, based on that first $10,000. If it goes into appeal and appeal and appeal and you keep the same attorney, I mean, that does turn into billable hours. Is that right?
If you're moving on to appeals, then that's a separate thing.
Now you're starting again. So if your attorney calls it a flat rate, then it kind of has to be a flat rate for the job.
Yes, unless something crazy, happens. Yeah,
Do
like
they just cover that in their contract usually?
I would think so, typically. But usually, my experience has been they've been doing it long enough, they typically know what's going to happen. When I think of them having to come back and ask for more, it's where you've gotten into the case and you've got to have an expert. And let's say this expert has to be flown in from New Mexico, and it was never anticipated, at the beginning that was going to be a necessary part of your case. But you found out later through discovery or, a piece of evidence was uncovered and you're like, we've got to have this. So, there's certain things that can come up at times, but most, for the run of the mill case that, that you see quite often, they know how to price it and they know typically what it's going to take to get that case from start to
I
finish.
guess I'm asking more like ethical and legally. If you call it a flat rate, does it have to remain that way, or is there like a loophole that says unless you need this expert, you call your client, get it approved? How
It would
does that
depend on how their contract's written, you know, and they could
Okay,
ask
so
them to
that's
sign another contract.
contract, and there's not like the universal rule for Alabama or
Mm,
saying if you charge $1,000, you can't decide 1,200 later.
I don't know of that, because, you know, if you can show a reason why that would need to be changed, then, you know, I don't know, I can't think of a
So what's an
specific,
instance then where a judge denies and says, no, this is too much? How do you,
like in a social security case, that's what I was talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Yeah, that was a social security case. You know, so let's
so they
say,
don't decide all the time.
the judges would be so overwhelmed. It would be, yeah, it would take up way too much of their time. But like, for example, in a social security setting, let's say, you've gone to 2 different hearings with this person, you've had, you know, you've covered, so, you know, you've got a file sitting like this, covering medical records, you've had to summarize it, you've had to meet with the client twice prior to these hearings, you've written briefs, you've done all this stuff, and you submit a bill, let's say for $8,000. Okay, the judge may say that's reasonable. If you've got somebody and their file's this thick and they have never met the client until the hearing, and they, you know, it's pretty obvious from what they've submitted they haven't spent that much time with the client, and they ask for $10,000, the judge can say, I don't see that the time
Okay.
justifies what you're asking for. So, does that make
Yeah,
more
makes
sense? Yeah, but she was asking in the Social Security arena, and that's a little bit different.
So like private practice, you can pretty much say, like, you know, if you want me to take your case, you're gonna pay me $10,000.
Mhm.
And they say, well, I'm not paying you $10,000, okay, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do your case.
Right,
I'm not gonna take your case.
right, right.
I mean, that private practice, you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah, you have a lot more leeway. Yeah. You know, but you know, the client does too. They have the freedom to go pick whatever attorney, you know, so,
You can call and get
Mhm.
different rates and.
right. Yeah, you can check around. And you guys will feel a lot of those calls. There'll be somebody, you know, stumped my toe and they want to charge me, you know, so much to do this and such case, you know, and they'll want to know what your attorney's rate is. You know, typically you need to talk to your attorney before you start giving out that kind of information at all. And they will talk to you about, you know, before you start processing cases.
Most commonly, what kind of fees do attorneys use?
It depends where you practice. I mean, you know, you can't price yourself so high that nobody's ever going to hire you. And at the same time, you can't be so cheap that,
Y'all making any money?
yeah, that you're not making any money. So it's just like any other business. You've got to know, you know, where it is. It also depends on the kind of case. You know, if it's a capital murder case, that is going to absorb so much of your time that you've got to price it high enough that you can't be starving half to death, because you've got that will take up a lot of your time and resources, and you know that. So that's going to be a really pricey case.
I mean, and I feel like that would be a lot of work that you would have to put other things on hold.
And that's the whole thing, you know, and when they, you know, when you throw that price out there and their eyeballs are like this, it's like you have to understand, I have to turn down and put aside all this other stuff for this, you know. And, you know, and especially in criminal cases, you know, you know, you've got somebody, especially if they're sitting in jail, you got to get it moving. It can't just, you know, lag out there forever.
Yeah.
There's certain constitutional issues, so, you know, so,
My brother, he's in prison right now, but,
oh, I'm sorry.
well, my parents, I mean, just on drug charges, my
Mhm.
parents forked out, the last time he was in prison, like $25,000.
Hmm.
I mean, he didn't kill anybody, so
Yeah.
I can imagine what.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
exactly.
money.
You know, but like I said, I mean, you price it, but there's a lot that goes into the price,
Mhm.
you know, and trying to
It'd be a
figure.
huge variance too, especially in criminal law, correct? I mean, like, one attorney that handles a lot of murder cases with an excellent reputation can charge quite a different fee than
Hmm.
an attorney just handling brand new murder cases. And
You know, I think murder cases in general, you know, it's going to demand a different amount of time than, you know, a DUI. You know, you can handle a lot more DUIs than you can murder
I
cases,
paid for one,
You know.
it's very expensive.
$17,000
$17,000 to the door, mid-range attorney.
See,
$17,000 to the door for him to go to jail for 20 years, so. I mean, it's expensive,
yeah,
even when you're flat cold guilty, it's just as expensive as when you're innocent when it gets to that level.
yeah,
It's even harder when you turn right back around and it's like you spend all that money and it's useless. It's like taking.
It's never
and flushing
useless.
it down the toilet.
But it's never useless. Every paper follows the entire time. I mean, I don't think so, not in
Mhm.
murder, it's never useless,
No,
because
no,
if you
that's
have
not what I meant.
a crap shot attorney, then later you get nowhere unless, maybe you get off because you had a crap shot attorney. I don't know.
yeah,
No,
you
what
could,
I meant was like, my brother, for instance, my parents have paid all these legal fees for him and time after time again, like you fork out all that money. That's what I meant about it being
Oh,
useless.
yeah.
if they come back,
If they
Right.
come, turn right back around and they do the same thing.
Yeah.
And essentially you're flushing 25 grand down the toilet.
That's what's really tough on families. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to stop enabling anyone. It's really hard to stop
Mhm.
enabling.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
But it's great for attorneys.
It
And
is.
paralegals.
That's where we're gonna make all of our money.
Like every minute counts, right, boss?
Yes, yes. And it does depend. I mean, you'll have some, you take them to raise. I mean, you've had them. I mean, you really do, and you just see them again and again. And I've gone to the jail at times, and I walk in the door, and they just start booing. I'm like, why? Because they know I'm mad, because they've screwed something up that we just got worked out, and
Yeah, like I just got you out of trouble 3 months ago. Here
Yes,
you are again.
yes. And you'll walk in, they'll start crying, and they're like, as bad as it is to be in here, I dreaded seeing you because I knew you would be A, disappointed, and B, what are we going to do now? And so those are
But
all,
it's good for you and bad for you.
well, you're always disappointed. I mean, for me, I always want everybody,
To do better.
to do, to do well and to come out, and you want to help, but sometimes everybody makes choices. So anyway, and depending on the case, like that particular client I was talking about, it was by the skin of their teeth that we got on the deal that we did. So then you're sitting there going, what's going to happen now? I'm not sure. So anyway, that's
Have you,
part of it too.
Have you ever done a murder trial?
Hmm. More than one, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I know that's bad, but it's also kind of exciting.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I used to be a prosecutor in Lee County, so I did it from that side, but I've also defended them too. So I've done both.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I've done both.
Prosecutor.
Yeah, I've done both. So it's interesting from both sides. But anyway, all right. Well, I would love to talk some more, but that's all for today.